You are watching This League, the show about the biggest league in the world. Only our lonesomes today, John Morrissey of New York, New York. The pipe is still not fixed. We will provide weekly updates. Shout out to the landlord. Today on the show,
Love it.
we get John's opinions on JID's new album. John, go.
Love it. Like it less than Alfredo 2, but love the album.
Big fan. A little bit all over the place on the production standpoint. Wasn't expecting that, but I like that, we're stretching a little bit. It was a good expedition for Mr. Jid.
He can mix it up stylistically in a way that appeals to me.
It felt like we had some, outcast influence, which was kind of cool. That was interesting. Yeah, JID or Jid. These are the
I
important
like Jid, I have to say.
people do like Jid. There are no periods in the name. But what is a Jid? I know what a Jit is, but not a Jid. Important things. Um, God loves ugly. He also loves Louisville City. It was not ugly from them. Uh, in lieu of starting with Miami and El Paso Locomotive, I think we should maybe start with the game between possibly the two best contemporary teams in league history. What say you, John?
A little bit more interesting, probably.
Yeah. It was bad for Charleston Battery. They've never won at Lynn Family Stadium or at Louisville in general, which was news to me. Well presented on the broadcast. Big round of applause to producer Emma Watson, who did a great job putting that game together. Um, in my mind, this was not evidence to the fact that Louisville City are 3 goals better than Charleston Battery necessarily, but it did feel like Louisville proved a point in winning this game the way that they did, that they are better right now in this moment. How do you walk away from this game, and what do you think the important long term big picture data point is from this resounding result?
I think so much of the way we've framed this season writ large in the USL is who can have the upper hand between Louisville and Charleston at the end of the day. Watching this game, seeing the defensive approach from Louisville and the way that they mostly kept a cap on Charleston, that feels like the takeaway. That Louisville knows how to set up their press to limit the tempo up the middle, force the ball wide, and make players like Langston Blackstock and Nate Dos Santos uncomfortable,
Yeah,
and then break with enough tempo to take advantage of whatever turnovers happen. And that doesn't come out with, or rather, it doesn't happen without some level of risk. Charleston had their opportunities. Damian Loss had to come up big in the first 15 minutes
yes.
to make sure that they could get this 3-0 lead, see it out. But at the end of the day, Danny Cruz was willing to take those risks because he knew his system had the upper hand. And to
Yeah.
me, highest level, that's what matters here.
I think this starts to pull at the thread of the broader point of what I kind of said to top it off. The score line says one thing, the game says another thing. Both things say that Louisville probably have the edge here, just to different degrees. You look at the overall spread of shots and shot creating actions, and Charleston had more shots on target. They scored 3 less goals. Damian Lass has had 3 consecutive games now with 5 saves, which illustrates he's made a huge jump this year in my mind. I picked him at the midseason points as the goalkeeper of the year in the league. I feel very convicted in that because I think he's gotten even better as of late. If he's not in this game, Battery score 90 seconds in to a match. Louisville actually took the lead 30 seconds beyond that. And we have a very different dialogue potentially presenting here. 5 saves in this game. He's fantastic. So let's just underline that, right? Pretty much even in terms of the statistics with the shots 14 for Louisville, 17 for Battery, 5 on target for Louisville, 6 on target for Battery. XG advantage is won slightly by Louisville, explained away by the fact that they had a penalty, which is worth 0.8 XG, which was the margin effectively. So, with all that on the table now, I will also now explain why I think Louisville were significantly better in this game. I think the tactical changes that Danny Cruz made were so well informed, so shrewd, and it didn't feel like Battery amended their style at all, and they were caught out for this. John, is that a fair reading of what took place?
Absolutely. And it manifested itself in a few ways. I was taking note of the use of Philip Goodrum,
Mm,
who had moments where he was charging ahead like a primary presser, but there was a real focus on using Jansen Wilson and Ray Serrano, arcing those closing angles and
Yeah.
painting the battery into a corner. Then, second layer, you've got Kevon Lambert stepping up, essentially man marking whoever was the closest center mid. Taylor Davila willing to sit deeper, play center field, and know that the press ahead of him is going to force an errant ball that he can then recover and move forward. Even beyond that, you've got Arturo Ordonez coming back into the team for the first time in a hot minute.
Yes.
He's equally aggressive, stepping forward, denying zone 14. It felt like MD Myers and Cal Jennings couldn't take a touch without Ordonez breathing down their neck. And it was this domino effect. From front to back, Louisville had an aggressive response to every pattern that makes Charleston so effective in a usual game. And it's not to say that we don't see some of these principles from Louisville in a given week, but the
Sure.
way it all came together just felt so front foot and so simpatico overall. It was brilliant defensive soccer.
Yeah. Eric Dobransky said this on the broadcast, and this is just widely true for Louisville, but I thought it was very succinct in the moment that he dropped it. It's layered. The threat is layered from front to back. Everything is kind of working in combination in this effect that we talk about a lot, which tilts the field against you. It is slowly just placing bricks on the scale. And eventually, the line that I kind of had coming into the game is it feels like the grass is your enemy at Lynn Family Stadium because you're climbing uphill. And that's always been true. It was true in this game, I think, in a different way. You look at it, and Charleston held 70% of the ball, but they played the fourth most long balls they played in a game this year, which, again, that's just so quintessentially Louisville. The big thing to me, John, there were three major changes, and I'll start with one and we can kind of dissect it. Um, the big one in terms of the gamble with the man management is dropping Sean Tosh. That's obvious. I think that was really well informed to play your three most athletic center backs, getting Josh Jones into this team, or Donez, and then, of course, Kyle Adams to handle the coverage that was required to take Cal Jennings and Andy Myers out of the game without committing midfield resources to that task. I thought that that completely shifted the game. It may have still happened with Sean Tosh, but it was way easier with these athletic profiles.
Absolutely. And it was a well-considered change because Charleston isn't a team with that vertical speed over the top. You want those players, the Joneses and the Adamses, to be able to step into the midfield with that very quick first step that they bring to the table. And at age, what, 34 or 35, Coach just doesn't at this point. And the way that they could then fill in behind Ordonez on the flip side of the coin, if he was the one stepping forward, they were in concert and they had the speed to execute what they were trying to pull off.
And that's been the big, if there is a pressure point to press against battery and build with this 4-2-2 style that we've talked about a lot that they employ, it's kind of like a no middle defense in basketball. There isn't a central 10 that can take advantage of the vacated space that exists whenever you're playing against a back three that's committing Kevin Lambert higher, which was the other big observation that I had in terms of the tactical approach. I loved how Kevin Lambert, first of all, he's finding his footing in this team. But moreover, when you think of his profile, it's this rangy kind of park ranger, fireman, destroyer type, right? And it's easy to box him into that. Danny Cruz pushing him higher up the field. And I think Louisville won this game from the mid block with him being used in that kind of role, backing the press. It forced them to either play wide, which allowed Louisville to create traps at the touchline, or to play vertically, which they had handled because of the three center backs and their athleticism. And it put Battery in a place where there was no right decision. I am shocked that Ben Tierman refused to change it in any way early on. Again, it's amplified by the fact that they fell behind to the degree that they did in the first half. But Louisville just felt like they were 10 steps ahead in every category.
Yeah, and you see coming out of halftime, right? Charleston goes for what's essentially a diamond with Rubio Rubin as the 10, very narrow midfield setup. That would have given them the numbers to at least have some sort of recourse against Lambert pushing high and the setup of the Louisville mid-block system. Pierman was slow to make that change. If it had come earlier, maybe it goes differently. But Danny Cruz, in the chess match sense, just had all of the right moves lined up, and Pierman didn't have the answer.
And this kind of now with momentum carries into the third thing that I noticed, which is now you're forcing Battery, if they are to progress the ball on the ground, to go wide and to use the fullbacks. And that's how you get access to a JD Torres or an Arturo Rodriguez for them to drive, maybe to carry the ball into a central space and start to open up that expansive area. So what did Danny Cruz do? He pushed Aiden McFadden into a advanced roll first, but a narrow roll in the final third and applied pressure to that joint. Didn't see it as much from Amadou Dia. I think that was out of respect to JD mostly, but it creates the first goal, the knock on header from McFadden. But he was lurking in those kind of areas, either weak side or ball side, all game long. And it felt like that really made it very difficult for Dos Santos to join in the attack without having to think about it. And forced, I guess, Battery into this kill zone on the right hand side where it felt like Louisville had success winning possession well. Serrano got in behind a couple times, and that was kind of the killer nuclear triad, if you will, from Louisville that they deployed.
And there were knock-on effects from that alignment where, in one sense, Dia's depth was informed by the runs that Cal Jennings likes to make.
Sure.
He's somebody who's constantly looping into that right side. So if you've got the deeper left wing back, you're stopping that from happening. It also created more of an elbow role for Josh Jones in possession. Now, he's maybe not the best passer in the world, but he's functional in that spot. He's not going to turn the ball over. That created more pressure on the Charleston press as they tried to defend when Louisville was in possession. And then, like you said, McFadden upfield, good header of the ball, gets that flick on for the first goal. It's crazy to see every decision we've just talked about, the three big changes,
Yeah.
pay off so clearly for this team, but every single one of them hit. And that's why this ended up being the scoreline that we saw.
And again, Battery were good for a couple goals. This could have changed very, very, very aggressively if a couple of different things go different ways. The double save from Damian Lass was ridiculous early on in the game to deny MD Myers, which would have been one of the best goals scored this year as a solo goal. You just think about what kind of effect maybe an Emiliano or Emilio Causa could have had in this game as a central 10, and you just wonder if it could have gone differently. I do feel like the leadership presence of Leland Archer was maybe missed in this environment as well. It felt like Akpanonu had a really rough day.
I mean, yeah, again, the first goal was the prime example, right? Where he doesn't have the communication with Dos Santos. He's played behind. There's a reason Jansen Wilson was on the score line twice coming off of that side. Akpanono just couldn't figure out where he was spatially. And Akpanono's been a good player. He's played both sides of the central defensive partnership this year. Maybe not up to the pressure of the moment and in front of almost 14,000 fans there.
Yeah, no, and the place was bouncing, and Charleston will need to remember that because in this result and in the fact that they lost on match day one to Louisville in a game that they probably should have won as well, they're likely to have to go back here. If things go the way that they never go in the USL, and that's chalk, they will have to win an Eastern Conference final at Louisville City because the likelihood of Louisville, who have lost one game this year, likely having to lose two more the rest of the way to allow Charleston back into the race for the Players' Shield. Now that the tiebreakers are turned against them as well, it just feels like that this is now the collision course, that Battery will have to look at this and figure out how to win in a place they've never won before. And this is going to make things much tougher. I think it puts Louisville firmly in the driver's seat as the favorite in the East.
Agreed completely. And I'm hoping that the quadruple sub we saw at halftime with Archer coming in with the shift in shape, let that be the guiding principle for the rest of the year. If you're Charleston, you know you're going to be a top two seed. Experiment. Figure out how you can make these shapes work, find the patterns so that the next time you hopefully are playing at Lynn Family Stadium, you have something different you can throw at this city team and try to get an edge.
Yeah. So, and we talked early, John, and just pulling to the wider focus once more here on the Louisville side, right? And what it maybe is indicative of their direction of travel. It's back-to-back home games now with 4 goals scored. Um, Against Frankfurt, Jansen Wilson scored. So, like, that's the first one in a run. You don't necessarily see that on the score sheet because it's a friendly. Also, in fact, scored against Leganes, who, by the way, Richmond kickers gave a real fight. So I don't know about Segunda Division side Leganes, but they did beat Louisville on that day 2-1. So you're now starting to see a Jansen Wilson that, and every time you talk to Danny Cruz, you get the sense that he thinks there's a real player there, but a lot of meat is left on the bone by him as an attacker, right? We've now seen him in back-to-back league games score. He scores two in this one, has a dazzling strike right before halftime. And that is now flying in chorus with Ray Serrano, who's always doing what he does and is their best attacker, and Philip Goodrum, who is being ruthless Philip Goodrum again and is fully up to the boil. That Louisville attack paired with this defense, it really becomes difficult to imagine a way when they play this well going forward that you are going to have any luck against them, especially in their home venue.
Yeah, and it's the ruthlessness from Jansen
Yeah.
Wilson that you point out. I think that's the real differentiator because there are options at that position. We've seen Sam Gleadle be an energy guy. Adrian Perez is a little bit more of a dribbler. Wilson, in the form we're seeing him now, can be a secondary finisher that this
Yeah.
club doesn't otherwise have. It's a crucial skill set, given the fact that Wilson is unbelievably good and innately skilled at taking up strong positions,
Mm-hmm.
finding touches where he can do damage. If this improvement in terms of what we're seeing finishing wise is real, and I think it might be, like
Yeah.
that's going to be a game changer.
Yeah, he gives them the flexibility in game to shuffle into a two striker approach with Davila either occupying that 10. Serrano can kind of float into that role. We've seen even at times McFadden get narrow and not play as a 10, sure, but provide that extra narrow overload that can very suddenly overpower, especially a back four team. And I do like the physical profile that he offers more than maybe some of their options. Talk about maybe like an Adrian Perez or some of the other guys that they've used there because it further accentuates the physical dominance that Louisville can provide, especially with Goodrum up front.
Yeah, and Wilson was somebody in his rookie season who played a lot of the wingback spot.
Yeah.
Like he's got that defensive instinct. He did it in school as well. That is the two heads of what he provides. And it makes so much sense within that counter press heavy system that Cruz likes to run with.
Yeah. Again, it's the physical bigness too. Like he's a 6 foot guy, right? Like he's a bigger guy. And I Louisville feels like they are getting better, which is the scary thing. It feels very, very significantly like Louisville are becoming a better team week on week. And it's not just momentum, it's nuance in how they defend, how they attack. Danny Cruz seems to be finding new skills in his players every week. I did not expect Jones to be a factor, but he's been their best center back over the last month.
Well, that's the thing. He's found money. And I think everybody who saw him play in the ACC at the University of Louisville knew that they had a player in Josh Jones. But you look at his profile, he's what, 6'4", 6'5".
Massive.
It's easy to assume he's just big guy. He'll sit in the middle of that back line and clean up late in games when you've already got a lead.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't be further from what he has provided. It's what you mentioned with the athleticism. Again, I really noticed the fact that he's clean with the ball at his feet and he's never going to give the ball away sloppily. Thinks a step ahead. And the fact that you can bench Shantosh in a given matchup and trust Jones to do a job, that's a level of defensive flexibility that I don't think any other contender in the East certainly has in their back pocket.
It might be a sterling example of Danny Cruz's most underrated ability as a coach, which is his man management, because he will know that Toast will not get rattled by this, assumably, having worked with him for
Yeah.
as long as he has, knowing that he's the club captain, being able to maybe pull him in. And I'm just guessing at this, but being able to pull him into a dressing room and be like, okay, we're going to go with the kid for this one. And the idea is that if we can show him we trust him here, he'll be able to stand up for us whenever we need him to do that. We're going to leave him in the center of this back three, and we're going to go with Ordonez because we need that athletic cover in this game. And Tosh can take that, but I think that will go a long way for the other two center backs that are going to be vying for the other position with Tosh. Or maybe it could be a signal of something that is shifting. It could genuinely be a change that they are going to go with this back three going forward. That will be a curiosity, I think.
I mean, what? Ordonez hadn't started a game since June in the league, I want to say. Jones seems like he just might be a nailed-on starter at this point, and given
Yeah.
the performances, that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, they are getting better. They are genuinely getting better.
Yeah.
I'm one last time just gonna throw the bullet point. Louisville with a lead is the most dangerous thing that exists in the USL. They are unbeaten this year when they score first. They have won 10 games this year in the 13 that they have scored first. Um, Battery score immediately. It changes the whole dynamic because Louisville has to play through a team with the ball, even with this team in composition. That probably doesn't go well in this game. So, all that for Ben Pierman to say, if we don't score in the first 15 minutes when we have to come back here in the playoffs, it could get ugly again. Um, do you think this Louisville team's more complete than they were last year, right now? Are they playing better right now than they were at any point last year?
I look at this performance and I think this team is better. I think they are more holistic. I think they're more complete. That's not to say I didn't trust the defense with Wes Sharpie in it last year, but
Mm-hmm.
you think about what loss has become, you think about the versatility of Jones. I love the dynamic with Lambert in the midfield, and I think he offers more defensively than Winder did in that same position.
Yeah.
So losing Wilson Harris up top matters, but when the back half is so rock solid, I don't know, I trust it more.
Again, the use of him high is so brilliant because he's big. He's just big. So if you're going to try and play through the lines, he's going to disrupt things. He's going to make it difficult. And then you have to try and dump into the space in behind. It brings the fight. It is so, again, it's just so endemically Louisville because it's another step that is just simply about getting in your face and making you uncomfortable.
Well, and shout out to Brendan Burke for trailblazing the 5-1-3-1 press this season. So Danny
Yeah.
Cruz taking notes there. But yeah, like, and Lambert, you didn't even see the whole kind of target 10 thing they've been doing where he is the guy they're aiming at with the long restarts. That wasn't a huge factor in this match, but it has been in weeks prior. What Lambert provides in that position is such a major step. And the fact that he has clarified, oh, here is what Lambert can add to this team that's different from a Winder, that's different from Zach Duncan, who was the presumptive starter there. Huge for Louisville.
It just is, you think about him and his flaws as a midfielder. Juan Guerra had moved him to center back, and I think that was a big part of him. He gets the MLS move to Real Salt Lake because of the fact that he plays well for Jamaica as a six. Don't get it twisted. Like that's what that's about. But beyond that, his ability to get the ball out from his feet in two touches just it's not there. It's not at the level even for a USL player. He is truly a true and true boxer destroyer type of midfielder that really doesn't give you much offensively until the final third. Louisville, what is their whole thing? They skip the build-up phase by winning with the press. So what's the point of having them deeper to sweep up second balls when you've got three athletic center backs on the field? Just put them higher, make them a menace, force teams to play over the top, and do it in a way where they can't just kind of lob it into the midfield because they got to get it over his frame. So it's got to go long, it's got to go vertical, and just the disruptive power. He didn't impact the game directly, John, in a lot of ways. I think McFadden was maybe the best player on the field for a lot of this game for Louisville. But in a lot of ways, the tactical deployment of Lambert is why they won so convincingly. I'm sure of that.
100%. You're not going to find disagreement for me. Like, and this was a game where Aaron Malloy felt like he wasn't even on the pitch for a
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah.
Lambert marked him out of existence.
Yeah. The only other thing I wanted to talk about in this game is the plan that it felt like Louisville had for JD Torres. I can't remember the last time I felt like JD Torres just wasn't part of the game. Um, they didn't man mark him. It's impossible to with how free his role is in this team. But the way that they passed him off and the way that they made him uncomfortable, the spaces they allowed him to get on the ball, it felt like that was very decisive in this game.
Yeah, and I was watching back some of that first 25 minutes or so before we got on. Depending on the situation, sometimes it's Dia stepping up, riding his back, making sure he can't turn. Sometimes it's Avila sliding over behind Lambert, tightening the space. Adams and Ordonez did the same thing, depending on what position Juan Torres was trying to take up. And that's before you even recognize what Ray Serrano did, body positioning, turning the hips, making sure you can't hit Torres with a pass at a useful angle, understanding how his pressing shadow can deny useful touches. It was a team effort. It was not a man mark, but it was so well designed and considerate in every facet.
Oh, okay, it just flashed me the 10 minutes left thing. Do you think we can tuck Tulsa, New Mexico into this type of a frame, or do you want me to restart and we'll just do it the rest of the pod from there?
Let's try it.
Okay. All right. Okay. So that's enough on the top of the East. Let's talk about the top of the West, which is coming into clear resolution with every passing match week. Sacramento, another impressive result, but obviously we are not speaking on them. We are speaking on Tulsa, who apparently are the best offensive team in the league now. They score five. It is in consecutive weeks for New Mexico United, who is their opponent on the day, the most goals that they have ever allowed as a club in the stretch of two games, having now allowed nine to Hartford Athletic and Tulsa. We know that Dennis Sanchez will be happy to get home. This has been a rough road trip. The final score is 5-2, John, and the headline is that it was 2-1 at halftime, and by the 53rd minute, it was 4-2.
You come out of that halftime break, and if you're New Mexico, you have to be feeling decent because you've moved Valentin Noel to the wing, you've got Jabong in the midfield, and you feel like your patterns are controlling the game to a certain extent. And this was a match where Luke Spencer experimented, right? Like we're going two strikers, we're putting Trevor Amen up top next to Taylor Calhera. Really more of a 5-3-2 shape out of the gates. And I think that played into New Mexico's hands. It let them build tempo, it let them break between lines. It wasn't enough pressure on the build-up phase against United. And Spencer decides, okay, done with the experiment. We're bringing El Madkar in. We're putting three forwards essentially on the pitch. And in that act, with El Medkar and Jamie Weber carving out the half spaces, they're finding room on either side of Getty and Zalalem. They're engaging the wingbacks on the overlap, creating these opportunities and disrupting any sense of possessive control that New Mexico had. And it felt like a bulldozer. Whenever there was a turnover of the ball, there just wasn't enough coverage. The recoveries were quite poor. Zalalem is absolutely not a destroyer. He doesn't attempt to tackle in this
Yeah.
game and wins one duel on the ground. You could just feel that momentum change. And once Tulsa got in those short field, semi-transitional moments, understood where they could find the overloads, it was game over like that.
Yeah, I know we wax poetic about Gideon Zalalem, and I think overly coffee shopped up individuals will cite this thought of falling in love with the idea of someone as opposed to the actual someone. And unfortunately, I think that might be the reality for Gideon Zalalem, who is a player that folks will wax poetic about in coffee shops like that. That is the profile. Dennis Sanchez certainly will have been one of them. Do they drink coffee in New Mexico? I feel like they drink alternative energy drinks,
Yeah, something like that.
something of the ground, some root. But with Gideon, it just is this team so fundamentally needs something he can't offer in terms of coverage. And in this game, you got to see them ripped apart in transition, but done so in a very different way. And it feels like that is the key point. When they get blown apart, it is always in transition, but it is done in a myriad of ways, which makes it a much bigger concern.
Yeah, and you think about the Hartford game, almost all of those concessions early in that match, New Mexico was in the attacking half, 10 players forward doing their thing. And then the instant the ball turned over, you'd get a run over the top from Hartford. They would break 40 yards and score. This was a different flavor of transition where New Mexico was giving the ball away in their own zone, but they still didn't have structure and they couldn't recover. They couldn't support Zalalem, who I think is so misapplied as a single pivot. Like the guy just needs a defensive partner next to him. But because of that setup, Tulsa has momentum. They're able to break against one isolated non-defensive midfielder and two center backs who are turning with their momentum in the wrong direction. It's game over. Nobody can go and close on the ball. Again, I keep saying it. The structure just isn't there. I felt like Lindsay and Gloucester really were poor defensively as well. These personnel seemingly just aren't built for transition. And I don't know if that means they need to go out and get a destroyer. I don't know if it means there needs to be a shape change, but something is fundamentally wrong with New Mexico in those post turnover moments.
And you talk about the different ways that it happens, right? And you touched on that at the top of that dialogue.
Yeah,
It just Hartford and the Hartford game may be an outlier because it's Usman Jabong playing center back, and that felt like the weak point, right? But it was playing in
sure.
space in behind. It was Jang running in behind, attacking the space behind a high line. This was with ball carriage, which has maybe been more so the way teams have attacked the transitional moments against New Mexico this year. Think about El Paso, think about Phoenix, and when we've talked about this before, it's been teams picking up the ball after winning it and driving and kind of it's not a slower transition, but it's a more what's Red Rover? That's the name of the game where everybody locks
Yeah,
hands.
yeah, yeah.
Line feels kind of like that. And a lot of these Tulsa goals are aberrational. That's been a case for them for weeks now. So maybe it's not. Serrato's just going to score a banger every week, I guess. But the bottom line is that Tulsa got a taste of what it's going to look like to punch up at the teams that they're vying with in the West. And again, we have another data point that says there is a fundamental defect in this team that is worthy of a recall in 2025.
Yeah, and just to kind of underline the point, you think about the way New Mexico builds up. It's essentially a 2-3-4-1 in this game. Two center backs, and then this line with left back, Zalalem, right back. If you can force the turnover and attack those seams behind that three-man base, you've got all the space in the world to do what you want to do. And that's why the numerical change that Tulsa made to get three forwards on the field was so important because it created the edge on Maples and Seymour in central defense.
Yep.
And it's not that simple. The game plays out more complex than what you can map up on a graphic. But I think that was a real driving dynamic for why the second half became a disaster in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, and it's such a damning aspect of the New Mexico game model too, because it compounds their biggest weakness, which is when you are able to sit against them, it is very difficult for them to play through teams. I believe they are the only team in the USL Championship yet to gain a point from a losing position. Um, it gets worse when they go behind. They expose themselves further, and it creates this compounding um, problem, for lack of a better term, that sees these super lopsided scores get hung up on them. And that just hasn't been fixed, which is mind boggling.
I think what's so frustrating in this match is that there was tempo in the first half in
Yeah.
a way that we have not seen from this team.
Yeah.
They figured out that if we could skip lines, hit Noel, hit Hurst dropping in before Tulsa's press could engage, we could really do damage. And that went away in the second half. When this team trails, it becomes the slowest offense you're going to see in the USL. So many sideways passes, very little engagement and service into the box. I don't know how Dennis Sanchez solves that problem. I think Noel was acquired to be that player. I think the hope is that Hurst can be, to an extent, a similar sort of changing player. I don't know. It just feels like the formula is off at the moment.
There's just so little physicality. It, it just,
Which you look at Bailey, you look at Jabong, players that have been physical at times with different teams. Why has that gone away?
it's just the physicality, and it's good to get physicality from those players. But when I think about where you need physicality the most in the field, spinally, it's in your six, it's in your center back tandem, and it's your striker. And in two of those places, they get none of it. Thomas Amon can provide some of it, but he just isn't a guy that you can look to play 90 minutes match week out at this stage, and it's a real problem for New Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, it's been since mid-June now since New Mexico won a league game. I'm just a bit worried about the direction of it all right now.
I did not realize it had been that long, honestly, at this stage, and the project is exciting. I wonder, obviously, when they signed Valentin Noel, I was like, yeah, that's the piece they need. I think they're going to win the West, and could not feel worse about saying that at this point in time. Valentin, we've seen him in a myriad of roles. This game, it's on the left. There are good moments, especially in a first half that, as you said, John, New Mexico were dominant in. But once more, it just feels like for whatever reason, something chemically in this team has become imbalanced since his arrival. I don't know if that has anything to do with him, though.
I think it's an existing trend getting worse independent of the entrance of Noel because we saw Las Vegas be fine in terms of the transition defense in a team with Valentin Noel as the star player. I think that there's really been a downward trend since Kalen Ryden went down injured, and we're really starting to see it manifest as teams have learned how to take advantage. You hoped that Will Seymour playing center back was going to solve that problem. Clearly, it did not help whatsoever. I'm willing to reserve judgment until Ryden is fully fit and starting games again and has
Sure.
found that chemistry with Maples, but I don't know, there might be something deeper broken. Like, I'm really starting to worry about the direction.
Tell me this: did it ever feel like this at any point with Vegas last year and Dennis Sanchez?
There was never a run where they were just consistently getting cooked in this exact same way.
Yeah,
There were lots of times where Las Vegas's offense felt stagnant, and we've seen that carry over, but the defense held.
yeah. Again, underscoring where we started, they have conceded the most goals in a two-game stretch in the club's history, at least in the league. They've conceded now multiple goals in 5 of the last 6 games, and they have not gained a single point from a losing position this year, which is only true for them. And they've now been exposed to enough of them where that is not a random thing. Sometimes you'll see that number low with good teams because they are always winning and in control. That would make sense for New Mexico, who control games through the ball and limit the amount of chances and goal scoring action that can happen in a game. That's not the case here. So let's just rule that out. Whenever I throw that number out, that's an alarming figure at this point in the year. And it's something that if New Mexico, you think about the teams that have won titles in recent years, less so Switchbacks, who just kind of rolled. But even Switchbacks fell behind early against OC in their title run and had to come back at home. Every team, Rising, of course, are the primary example of going behind and having to dig out in playoff games. It is a skill you have to have in a playoff setting, and it's one that New Mexico just haven't shown. Um, let's finish up on Valentin Noel very quickly here. The relationship with Greg Hurst. He comes back. Greg Hurst scored a great goal in this game, a consummate Greg Hurst goal, effort goal in this game. They just don't work together. I'm ready to plant my flag in the context of this scheme, system, and team. They cannot exist together. It's too redundant.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the positions that Greg Hurst wants to take up, dropping in into zone 14, exactly where Noel does his job. Not only is it duplicative in that area, but it leaves you without a number nine. Like
Yeah.
that has to change. And we spent so much time talking about Luis Fernando being so important to this chemistry because from the left wing, he's the vertical runner. If you don't have that, if Hurst is dropping in, and if it's all the same stuff that you're getting from Noel, oh, the mix just doesn't make sense.
Somebody in this team has to be explosive. For all of this to work, somebody in this team has to be explosive and put the fear into an opposition's mind that in one burst they can change a game. And when you put Noel and you put Greg Hurst on the field, a center back knows the entire thing is going to happen in front of them. They're not worried about the space behind. And I think that's the key point, maybe, is that New Mexico have no way to threaten you in doing anything other than what they do. And that becomes easy to defend.
Sure, and it maybe it's a different story if you're getting really aggressive movement from someone like a Chris Gloucester. Gloucester didn't take a touch in the opposing box and had one shot in this
Yeah.
game.
Yeah. Well,
What is that spatially? Yeah.
we're going to talk about Loudon here in a minute. I just think a player like Drew Skundrich, just because of his movement, the fact that he's just constantly moving around and agitating without the ball, he would be such a huge addition to this New Mexico team. You think about what Nananen Hosu brought them last year. That's just missing. That profile is missing. It's been amplified in a way that makes it impossible to ignore now, which is probably a good thing for Dennis Sanchez without Kalen Ryden as the organizer, the captain, all those important things, even though Taylor Maples is literally the captain. But you get what I'm saying, right? Without that, it just feels like they are a team that's a paper tiger. Like that's the best term I keep coming back to. Yeah.
100%.
All right, let's talk about Rhode Island. I'm going to say good things about Rhode Island, John. It's a big day. I'm sad Ryan's not here for this.
It's been months since we've tried to do this.
Yeah. So we're going to look at this one, Rhode Island Loudon, 0-0. I believe that was the scoreline of both games they had last year, too. I called one of them, so I probably should know this, but I'm pretty sure both games finished at 0-0. And that is the score here. I texted you. It felt like it was the highest scoring 0-0 I've ever watched. There were so many good opportunities in this game.
And especially in that last half hour when all of the new faces are coming into the game, it opened up. And I think there's a lot to take away in a positive sense from both of these teams.
Yeah, we talk about how plotting Rhode Island have been at times this year. I'm going to call into your attention this number that we pulled up a lot of times, which is the time in play number, and put it in context with the Louisville game. That game went 100 minutes, factoring stoppages and all the other components of that game. The ball was in play for 47 minutes. In this game, the game goes for 95 minutes. The ball was in play for 61. That is always a case when Loudon's involved, but Rhode Island, with the physicality, the way they play, that maybe hasn't been the way it's gone for them this year. It felt like there was a lot more spirit and juice and energy within this Rhode Island team throughout. And Loudon were just loud.
Yeah, and I think this was a meaningful week for Rhode Island getting back to what we saw them be in 2024. And that comes on a couple of fronts. Wednesday and at the weekend, you see one, Matthew Corcoran debuting after getting loaned in from Nashville. But equally important, frankly, is the return of Koke Vegas. Jackson Lee has been fine in goal. I think he's a good shot stopper. Koke Vegas is one of one in the USL in terms of what he does with the ball at his feet. These were the two games all season long where Rhode Island played the greatest share of passes in their own half. And I think that was an underrated aspect of the 2024 team was that safety at the back, the ability to pass it around until you've drawn pressure upfield. Then you're springing into space, finding a Fuson or a JJ Williams at their feet. That came back. Like that was a factor for Rhode Island in a way that it hasn't been all year long. Throw in Dwayne Atkinson in the final half hour against Loudon, and it feels sharper. Atkinson is a Jamaican international,
Yes.
somebody who is so good, speedy, and technical with the ball at his feet, can dribble in tight spaces in a way that I think Noah Fuson isn't consistent about doing. I thought some of his kind of back shoulder movement as a complement to the main striker for Rhode Island was quite good. So you think about Vegas, Corcoran, Atkinson coming into this team. There is more surety as you're trying to build out. There's a sharper push at the attacking end of the pitch. I can't help but feel positive.
We have talked a lot about Rhode Island missing JJ Williams, and JJ Williams looked up for it. He's looked up for it since he came back. I thought he was massive in this game and showing all the things you want from a guy that I could see being the guy who gets the armband next year, even if Koke is still around. Right? He feels like he has become the face of this project in a way no other player has. And instantly has resumed that role since getting back in the team. I think we all understand at this point the best way forward for Rhode Island is with JJ Williams as a one man number 9. I think that that's agreed now. It's not him and Dequa, it's JJ. Yeah.
For
Uh,
me, yeah.
yeah. The thing that's been curious this year, and it makes sense, Rhode Island are desperate. They're trying to figure out what's wrong and how they can fix it because the season's important and they set a very maybe unrealistically high standard for themselves last year. Um, the way they continue to add pieces and exploit the market, in one hand, is a little bit alarming because of the continuity aspect. In the other hand, you appreciate because they aren't really going to settle for it's wrong this year. We'll get them again next year. And I think Atkinson finally might be the silver bullet. Just brought a layer of seasoning to this team instantaneously that they have missed all year. You wouldn't be exposed to him a lot unless you're watching the Jamaican Premiership. It's his first time playing in the U.S., but just I use the word spontaneity a lot. It's the willingness to take risks. So I think that is the most missed thing. for Rhode Island all year and the thing that he instantaneously pumped into the squad.
100%. And that's been the missing component. It's useful to compare to Loudon, who's got Abdelatif Abakora, who will take somebody on, beat a defender, and force this domino effect of rotations. Rhode Island hasn't had that player, straight up. Atkinson maybe isn't there yet. I want to see more of him in action before I come down hard in his favor.
Sure.
But man,
Look,
that cameo he had in this game, like this feels meaningful
yeah,
for a Rhode Island team that when we've talked about them, we have hammered home. They don't have off-ball movement. They can't bend defenses. That changes if you've got a dribbler, somebody with a sharp edge like Atkinson.
yeah, and the off ball movement thing becomes a lot easier when you've got a guy that by himself can break a line, which is supposed to be Noah Fuson,
Yes.
and it hasn't been this year. It's supposed to be Maxi Rodriguez, and Maxi has come on as an offensive threat and that final action player for them. I think he's up to 6 goals this year in the league, which is a really good
Yeah.
return, but isn't a guy that's providing that for them this year. And Atkinson could. I think that he will be the left-sided 10 winger type. It'll be interesting to see what kind of relationship he forms with Quizera if that is the deployment. But with all the good things we're saying about him, Rhode Island's most impressive player in this game is the 19-year-old Matthew Corcoran, who looks like a much more mature player than the player that we saw in the championship with Birmingham, now on loan from Nashville.
Yeah, it's 45 of 49 as a passer, which is
Yeah.
classic Corcoran stuff. But I think it's the defensive positioning, the ability to clog spaces and make it just difficult enough for Apicora to do his thing or Velo to get a touch. That's the growth that we've needed to see from Corcoran. He's put on a little bit of size. He's still not a tank by any means. But again, it's enough for a Rhode Island team that is trusting him to do a defensive job next to Mark Ibarra so that Maxi can get upfield, so that Atkinson can feel liberated to be that transitional threat.
You know what it feels like? It feels like a 19-year-old versus a 17-year-old. Think about how much more confidence
Sure.
you had as a human being stepping into any room with adults at 19 compared to 17, right? And beyond that, now he started games in Major League Soccer, and he'll look around at
Yep.
everybody else in the field and be like, yeah, I'm up for this, whatever, and just run a game. Now, again, the biggest issue with Matthew Corcoran stepping into this team is only 19% of his passes have been forward since getting to Rhode Island. He's a very retentive player, and that could maybe bring out the worst qualities in this Rhode Island team. But I do think that his ability to be so just stainlessly retentive may allow other players to be a little bit more free.
And when you're Rhode Island and it is that retention and that sideways passing, I think for a lot of teams that comes so close to your own net, that really isn't the case. Like the default model for much of last year and in this past week was you typically try to push the line up, keep building that line of confrontation upfield and upfield. And Corcoran is safe enough passer under pressure as well to make that happen. So yes, it's sideways, but every time he hits a pass, it is to a teammate who is taking a couple steps upfield, pushing that line and applying more pressure in a way that Rhode Island hasn't had previously.
Now, the real curiosity will come if we really do think Atkinson is the difference maker that he could be. Theoretically, he's playing off the left in the pocket, which would drop Maxi Rodriguez a line. And then what do you do? Right. Again, this has been the issue we've had all year. Like now
Yeah.
Mark is back. He starts this game. Do you play Corcoran and Maxi Rodriguez together and maybe risk the transitional cover and the defensive actions and the ball winning to get your best creative group on the field, the best going forward group on the field because of how Corcoran operates as a low lying tempo setter? Or do you drop Maxi, who's starting to find it, or do you go as far as to drop Noah Fuson, which is, again, this is the big jigsaw problem that Connor Smith has had all year.
I mean, obviously, given that this was a substitution pattern thing, it was Fuson who came off for Atkinson in this game. And until Maxi also subbed out, it was 5-2-1-2 with Rodriguez as this kind of number 10, but could press up like a striker with Williams and Atkinson on either side of him. I'd like to see them start a game like that.
Yeah.
See if it works, because Williams is athletic enough to provide that cover. Atkinson can do the same thing. If you need more width in the midfield, drop Maxi and let Ibarra and Corcoran fan out. There's variability within that shape that I think it's worth the risk in order to test the offensive waters.
Yeah, if you're not going to play, the only other like big complaint that I have with Rhode Island the rest of the way is I'd like for them to commit to a center back trio and stop
Yeah.
shuffling. I think that's going to be important, especially with Coque Vegas coming back into the team. You're prepping for what's going to be a hard playoff run where you're going to have to do what you did last year and win games on the road because they're not going to get home games at Tidewater Landing at this point. Like you're pushing for the playoffs. You're not pushing for a home playoff game. It would take a miracle for that to happen. Um, I think that at a certain point, you wonder if with these center backs that don't get forward, maybe you just commit to wing backs that aren't really fullbacks at all. Maybe it's Fuson instead of Older Sanchez and Quizero on the other side, that kind of thing. We saw that at times last year as well. I think that could be an answer, but I think this is getting closer for Rhode Island. And curious to see if they can continue that. We can talk about the Loudon side if you don't have anything else on that.
Do you understand Amos Shapiro Thompson just as a player?
I know he's got a hyphenated name and he wears 77, so that would be why Connor Smith
Okay.
would make sense for them to play him.
I don't get it with him. Like, he's useful. He's a safe player who understands his responsibility. This is a team that needs more than that, simply put.
And again, the position you've got to bet the house now. You're
Yeah.
not playing with anything extra in the bank. Like you have to take the risks because where you are right now, the return on downsized loss and minimized profit and playing it safe isn't going to get you into the playoffs, which would be a disaster. It would be an outright disaster. And for Connor Smith, you never want to call for somebody's job, but if they miss the playoffs, that's a real dialogue that has to happen at the C-suite. They would be irresponsible to just be like, down year, brush it off. And again, this is nothing against Kano, but at that point, if they aren't willing to take the risks that could get them into the playoffs after a slow start, and I fully anticipate they do get there. Don't get me wrong, but Hartford's surging. Hartford's heading the right direction. They're right level with Rhode Island right now. And Rhode Island also has to deal with the schedule congestion of the Jaeger Cup as well, in addition to this.
Well, they've played the most games of any team in the East right now, tied with Birmingham. Like, they do
Yeah.
not have leeway at the moment.
Yeah. So you wonder how much they're willing to gamble because at a certain point they're going to be forced to. And I know with the Jaeger Cup thing, it is duplicative to make that point because Birmingham are also going to have to deal with that, as are Hartford, and those are the contemporaries with them in the playoff race. But of those three, John, who would you pick to make the playoffs at this
Oh,
stage?
Hartford going away, like not even a doubt.
That's crazy. How
Which
about
is crazy to say, but
Miami and course with that conversation? Like these teams are going to be asked to become their truest selves right now because they don't have the capacity to mitigate the downside. Because they need all 3 points. Draws aren't going to. It's the same problem that Rhode Island had last year, where the draws just stacked up.
no, for sure.
Um, let's talk about the Loudon side now because I really like what we've seen from Loudon in terms of having the stall, had the really good start. Loudon of old probably could have accepted what they had done this year already as a success and not really improved the team. Now, have they done it through permanent signings up until this week and signing Kimi Ordonez? No. Huge statement of intent signing a player with his pedigree of full blown international on a 3+1 year deal. Like, that's a huge deal for this club. So let's not gloss that over. Didn't get to see that on the playing side as much in this game. But you talk about bringing in Karamoko and not being content with that. Omari Glasgow is a player that I want to dive into in detail beyond just this game, but let's first look at him in the specter of this game. Thought he was wonderful and thinks, I think at least he could be a player that shifts the dynamic for Loudon down the stretch run, gets him out of this rut.
There have been moments where Loudon feels one note, and it's can you get the ball to Abacora? What can he do on his right foot to bend the defense? This match, Glasgow comes in for the final half hour, and he's almost Abacora light on the right side, cutting in on the left foot, very vertical in his movement, clever about the diagonal runs, finding seams in Rhode Island, very quick player. it felt like it gave Loudon this Hydra aspect where they had many heads going at it. Ordonez, by the way, coming in as the central striker and occupying players, putting a body on guys in a way that Zach Ryan and Riley Boudoir don't always do. Obviously, they didn't get a goal, but there were chances. Glasgow was finding his own shot. Having somebody who's capable of doing that creates a more balanced approach from side to side that I think is something that can elevate Loudon out of the lull that they're in right now.
It's an interesting one because I've had Glasgow a lot in MLS Next Pro, just working with Chicago Fire too and calling some of those games. And it was clear at the tail end of last year that he was a player that was above the level. Fire have a really good generation of players coming through at this present moment in time. You just think about the year that Sergio Orihel has had in MLS and cementing his spot as the chosen Greg Berhalter #6 for that team. And there are a lot of players in this generation of Chicago guys that are of that caliber. And there wasn't really a place for him on the two side because he was too good for the level. And that can actually harm the development, I think, to a degree of other players in an MLS Next Pro team when there's a guy that is just so far above it that's relegated to Next Pro. But Glasgow, who, by the way, has been a full blown Guyanan international for some years now, wasn't going to crack this team for Fire. They have a DP in Jonathan Bamba on one wing, and they've got Philip Zinkernagel, who's becoming, I'm not going to say MVP candidate. That's going too far, but
Household name in MLS. Yeah.
yeah, I just did a graphic design project with MLS. The album cover was made for All Star Weekend for Philip Zinkernagel. Um, and by the way, yeah, he had 2 assists the last game against LAFC, so he's still doing his thing. And then Marin Hal Salesi is the backup winger, so there's no place for Amari Glasgow in Chicago Fire's team. But that does not mean he's not an MLS caliber player in this instance, which can be the case with some of these loan moves. So this is a guy who's hungry to prove himself. And I think he understands this is an audition for other MLS teams because the pathway to play time for Chicago might not be there. So there's going to be urgency from a young player who understands how pivotal this is in his career, which isn't also always the case with MLS loanees, correct?
Oh no, for sure. And I mean, what you mentioned at the end there about this is an audition for MLS. Think about what somebody like Samuel Deneron did. Coming down, does his job, gets a move, and becomes a contributor.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And now as we talk about him in the ecosystem of Loudon writ large, I think you see flashes of what he is as a player in this game. And this is no affront to Ben Mines, who I think is a very useful player, is a good player for Loudon in the role. But as this is ground to a slowly skidding stop because of the lack of depth, which this will help, like flat out, this will help that he is dynamite. Like he is dynamic. He can change a game from the touchline, cutting in, does everything you want a winger to do, is always, always, always looking to go to goal in some capacity, whether that's as a provider or as a driver. But his first intention is always to run straight at you, which is the best quality a winger can have. If a winger is confident enough to believe that they can just run through you with the ball, everything else opens. Glasgow, as a young player, has that, and he will be such a profiteer off the fact that teams are cheating to the side with Velo and Abukora and Awua because he's going to have isolation. So in that way, I think this is just brilliant scouting by a new front office from Loudon and the right kind of lone player to bring in.
Yeah, you have hit the nail on the head that he is the explosive presence. I mean, it's what we talked about with Atkinson, right? Somebody who can change the game in a moment and has that skill set. Loudon has been cycling options on the right. Sometimes it's Mines. Pedro Santos has been fine if uninspiring. It's become clear that Florian Velo cannot be a winger in 2025 anymore, even though he's done it in the past.
Yeah.
So there was a hole at that spot. And to get somebody like a Glasgow who put up 9.5 XG and XA combined last year in Next Pro, again, clearly above the level, a great dribbler, a great work rate, as a complement to everything that we know Abukora can do, home run of an addition.
Yeah, like I called one of his games in Next Pro this year because you could tell Chicago, who are a team that had a ton of college guys that were moving on, and in the middle of the season had a big churn in their team. and could have looked to pull some of those MLS guys back down because they had three or four basically that are just kind of rotting away as senior players on the bench and not getting the PT. They could have brought him down, and they tried. They were like, "What does this look like?" And he so clearly was just the best player on the field in a way. Again, that's kind of detrimental. And like we're talking about a Chicago Fire 2 team that just beats a top of the table Michael Bradley led Red Bulls team 9-2, right? Like they're playing very well, so it would make sense to make good better by adding a player like Glasgow. It's also a signal of belief I think that Fire have to push him into the setting to see what he might do, and he just offers them something that they've just not had, which is a winger that can get one on one, get byline, and get in behind a defense, which now that I'm thinking about it and saying about it, this is a move that might massively help the goal scoring numbers of Zach Ryan.
You would hope so. And it takes some of the burden off of Ryan, who has had to drop in and be
Yeah.
this setup man so often. If he knows he's got wingers that can do that job, can beat players, and cut out the need for that very centrally oriented possession, that means Zach Ryan, who is a great poacher on his day, can set himself up to receive that service. It creates a new balance for Loudon.
Now, the question is, do you think he's able to unseat Pedro Santos as the first choice winger by the end of the year? Do you think that's something from the brief amount of time you got to see him play against Rhode Island? Do you think that's something that could be in the cards?
I mean, I think he should next week, frankly. Loudon is a team that's in a rut. Like, yeah, they got a draw against Rhode Island, but it has been a rough few
Yeah.
weeks. I have talked a lot about I think they need Erlinson to get healthy for this to be fixed. If the defense is going to be an issue, go all out with the attack. See what you can get with Glasgow. See if you can tilt the pitch because of that two-sided star level effort that you're getting from your midfield. What can it hurt at this point?
Yeah.
And Loudon is in the advantageous position of being 8 points up on the playoff cut line. That's not to say that they have infinite room for experimentation, but if you think that Omari is up to the level, put him in and let him prove it.
It's interesting because a lot of the same traits that Karamoko has are typified by Glasgow's game. It's just to a more extreme extent, which tells me that this front office knows what they need and are actively looking for it. And maybe more to a greater extent, shows that the objective isn't just to tread water and get a home playoff game. It's like actually to punch up at Battery, at Louisville, and see what they can do. Because I think the way things were going, it may be tough to imagine a pathway for them to get a home playoff game. But realistically, and maybe the Kimi Ordonez signing is a more direct signal of that intention. I appreciate that Loudon are trying to make it better when there's been some questions about the commitment of the organization to this team and making them the most viable competitor.
What I love about all the moves this last week is it's short horizon and long horizon.
Yes.
Glasgow is going to be here for a couple months. He's going to do a job. Ordonez might be an impact player in the next handful of weeks. Who can say? But Ordonez is here until what, 2028 if he wants to be, if the team wants him around. That is something that Loudoun United in their history has never afforded to a
Yeah.
prospective signing. That's a sign of progress for them, for the league. It's a statement of intent.
And beyond that, and we can finish here on Loudon, it's also a sharp understanding of, hey, this Abdul Latif Abu Kora guy is probably not going to be with us forever. We're probably going to sell him at some point. That would be the best outcome for Loudon. Let's be very honest about that. The best outcome for Loudon United as a club is to sell Abdul Latif Abu Kora for a lot of money. And now they've just lined up a player in Glasgow. If this goes well and the MLS market is not there for him, where they can immediately reinvest that money in bringing him in permanently if it works. They've done that with Ordonez preemptively. And it's the smart, thoughtful planning that I appreciate. It feels like there's an organization behind Ryan Martin at this point that can like actually do something sustainable on the progress that they've already put together.
I mean, there are obviously questions about Loudon as a project, given some
Yeah.
of what we heard. But the fact that Steve Birnbaum and whoever else is making the decisions at this point behind the scenes has such a clear-eyed understanding of what the team needs, how they can make themselves attractive to players and build a longer term strategy, I think that's hugely encouraging.
I think that's enough on this game. We've gone long on three separate games. We will go short on the other games. Um, John, anything in particular grab your attention beyond Hartford beating the pants off Birmingham Legion 4-1?
Actually, on that point, Malik Howell looked dismal. Edwin Lasso looked dismal. What are we doing here? Those are two players that were brought in to be the core defensive pieces for this Birmingham team. The midfield feels very, very, very broken, and it's putting the defense on an island. I think it's kind of shocking at this point. Mark Briggs hasn't changed the shape in the system. Danny Trejo, meanwhile, I think is out injured, but there were some rumbles online that he was heading to California for unknown reasons, not to stir the pot there. But I don't know. The vibe around Birmingham and the lack of effort I'm seeing from that team is shocking at right now.
Hey, Phoenix Rising. He played pretty well for you before at some point. You just sold a winger. Thoughts? It's not
I
going to,
wish.
but could be cool, I guess. Hartford Athletic, good at soccer. Who would have thought? Not me.
The most fun team in the league. Many people are